I was going to have a video earlier today, and then actually this is my maybe second, third time recording it because of a hardware complication, which reminds me of a point that I think is probably worth discussing, and that is about the complexity of more advanced hardware. That sometimes when we're starting out with things, we feel like we need a better camera, better mic, better this, that, and the other. Or maybe you're building games and you might feel like, first I need a proper gaming rig with a better graphics card or whatever the thing might be. And one of the things that happens is that very quickly we have more ways to shoot ourselves in the foot, to get lost in the weeds. And this is something that, I've been doing this now enough years, and not just this on YouTube, but also professionally, a lot of Zoom calls and podcast recording and so on. So invested in some equipment, but basically the plug and play stuff, the things I started with, my old Samsung Q2U, the probably built-in mic on the thing, really worked fine for a long time and didn't have the same complications that now when I have a problem in my audio, it may or may not be the actual mic. It might be the line, or the line connecting it to the preamp, or the preamp connecting it to the Focusrite, and then Scarlett's Focusrite. That's got another cable running that over to the machine, and basically there's so many more points of failure and complication. It's like if you've ever messed with a proper DSLR, you very quickly figure out that there's so many settings and things for ISO and for white balance and for calibration, and obviously those things can be mastered, and people who study photography do it and get better results from it. But for so many of the rest of us, you're basically going to wind up converting it to auto anyway, in which case you may as well be using your smartphone, which is already doing lots of clever things to make it much more easy and automatic. Our very first, I think actually not just maybe our first audio trainer, might have actually been our first trainer who was a specialist in a certain field in Home Team now years ago. Ryan Stunkel of Blip Sounds. These days, Chase Bethia is our audio trainer instead, but Ryan used to talk about this point where when people are starting out with audio, they first want to buy really expensive mics and do some field recording and shotgun mics and all kinds of custom configuration hardware and mixing boards and stuff. And the reality is that pretty much the better idea is to first rule out doing what you can do with what you've got, right? Whatever, literally the device that's in your pocket is already much more powerful than people probably had 15, 20, maybe 10 years ago in many cases. And basically, until you hit that limit, it's too early to upgrade, to worry about the equipment. That part of what was happening is that someone wasn't really doing it, wasn't really getting into it, wasn't following tutorials, wasn't taking action on it. And if you're not, well, then buying more expensive equipment won't actually fix that. It might even make the problem worse or give you more guilt over the wasted money because, of course, it's not worth it if you don't use it. With Black Friday sales coming up for all kinds of things, you're going to see a lot of situations where there is an enormous discount on gear, on services, on equipment. But the thing to keep in mind, right, is if you don't actually use it, if you're not going to use it, then it's not going to be worth it. There's no amount of discount that something becomes valuable if you don't use it. And it's one of the things that, in many cases, right, if someone buys a book but doesn't read it, buys a video course but doesn't take it, attends a program but doesn't go. I mean, if you could get into Stanford but then you never go to class, well, then it wasn't worth it, right? You've got to actually do it. And so the first thing to do is to actually prove out to yourself that you are using it, that you are hitting the limits of what you can do with it. Then is the time to start looking into upgrades, on taking it to another level, investing further in. And again, you certainly can and will and do get some better results from better equipment. But if you're premature into it, all you wind up doing is getting lost in the weeds of further complications. And this is where even for game developers, who again, I kind of briefly alluded to earlier, sometimes get this thinking about like, well, first I need a better, more modern machine. And really that can be a penalty when you have a great graphics card and great hardware and great processor, top of the line, cutting edge, huge budget machine. Part of what happens is that it's really invisible to you if you have performance problems. You don't find out till everybody else on their perfectly normal home computers can't play it well, that there were significant issues in optimization, in poly count, in shaders being used, and technology you're trying to lean on. And it can actually be an advantage that not only is a machine from a few years ago, off the shelf, pretty standard, no high-end graphics card, perfectly fine, it can actually help you make software that's more likely to just run fine on similar machines that a majority of people also have access to, and not just only being able to build things accessible to people who also have very high-end recent rigs. So anyway, that's the thought. Again, a little bit delayed today from my planned scheduling just because of my own microphone hiccups and how much longer it took to troubleshoot the different parts of the pipeline, and that quite often what you have is totally fine. First, be using it for a while, right? Make some podcast episodes, make some games, make some videos, take some photos, do the thing you're there to do. And if or when you hit the limit of what you can do with it, but you've actually shown yourself that you are doing it with consistency, like a lot of people like to mention, right? You can't course correct if you're not in motion. You can't steer if you're not driving. Get doing it first, then and only then is the time to start really looking at, okay, well, maybe it's time for an upgrade if you're running into the challenges and limitations of your hardware, your constraints, your gear, so on. That's it for now. Thanks for being here. As always, catch you another day. Bye for now.